Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Keri Cascio, and for those of you who I've not met before, this is a picture of me with my coveted backstage pass to see Alton Brown live last Friday night. That was a lot of fun. As Felicity mentioned, you can follow along on hashtag ALCTS, so ALCTS. And we do not have a way for everybody to chat with each other on here, so that's a way to kind of do a little back channel, and we can get in there later on. So welcome to the Meta or Zen webinar, as somebody called it to me the other day on Twitter. So I heard you like webinars, so here we are having a webinar about webinars, so you can learn how to do webinars. I first did this presentation about 5 years ago, but I have been presenting on webinars for well over 10 years. So if you guys can remember back to the days of DRA, that's when I learned how to do webinars, so somewhere around 2001. And Alexis asked me to do this again because our webinar program has really grown over the last couple of years since we started it, and we're happy to have a free webinar today to let you learn how to do webinars. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover what to cover in a webinar, how to present it, how to keep your attendees interested, some of the good and the bad about webinars. I know some people kind of cringe when they hear the word webinar. Some people say, yay, webinar, I don't have to go anywhere, and we'll get a little bit of that going too. And then we'll wrap it up. So I do invite you to ask questions throughout. There is a question right now. Somebody said, will this be recorded? Yes. It is being recorded. You will get a copy of that and a copy of the slides at the end of the session from the ALCTS office. Also throughout this webinar, I did some informal polling on the web over the last couple of weeks through Facebook and Twitter, and I got some feedback from others about their opinions on webinars and why they like to come or not come to them. So why webinars? You know, I think that they're really great ways to find a useful topic that people want to know about right now that they can go back into their library and implement immediately. Sometimes you can't quite implement it immediately. It's also good for things like theory and knowing what's coming down the line so that you can plan. So you can plan the next 6 months, year, 2 years at your library to know if a new technology is coming, a new process is coming that you're going to have to take advantage of. It's a great way to stretch travel and training dollars. There's lots of free webinars out there, like this one, and other things you might find as recordings. Sometimes, for example, even though we do charge for most of the ALCTS webinars, after a certain amount of time, they are available for free on the web, and you can always get them a little later on. Other people really like it because you can attend during work, you can watch it after hours, you can watch the recording later. Someone told me that they really love to watch it on the on their lunch hour, and that works for some people too. Right now I'm presenting this from my home. As Felicity mentioned, I am in snowy Missouri. My library has been closed yesterday and today, and I am coming to you from my home office. One of the other things that I really like about webinars is when you watch them in a group. So when I've done this at my own library, we get to talk during, sometimes, after, more often, and see if it's something that fits us, something that piques our interest, something that we can have further conversations on. And it's really a nice way to interact with your colleagues, again, without having to take 5 or 10 people out of the library, across town, across the state, to have the same experience. So I'm going to ask my first poll here as we're getting started. And I would like to know from you, what of these things have you done? And you can select all. Have you attended a conference before? Have you attended a webinar before? Have any of you presented at a conference before? Have any of you presented a webinar before? And I'm going to wait a moment for these to come in. I know that everybody's coming in today with some different experiences, and I hope that you all get a little bit of something. It's interesting to see that almost all of you have attended a webinar before, attended a conference before, or even presented at a conference. So I have a lot of experienced people on here. as well as and then, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't give you the option for all of the above. Yes, so there is also the all of the above option that you have done all of these things. So I'm going to show you what we have here and what our results are so far. Some people are saying that they are going to present a webinar, which might be a reason why you came in on here today as well. So a lot of you have experience with this, and I like to say if you have presented at a conference before, if you've done a conference presentation, it's really not that much different than going off and doing a webinar. It's a lot of the same time. So a webinar is about an hour, a conference presentation is about an hour. Actually, even now, our state library has gone, or state association has gone to 50-minute sessions. So basically what I'd like to do today is help you out. If you're feeling like this little dog here and you feel like you have no idea what you're doing, hopefully by the end of this you'll have a little bit more clue, you'll have a couple more tips. I always say if I can get one or two things out of a training, I think it's worth it. So hopefully I can give you one or two things that will help you out in the future when you're asked to do a webinar or you're thinking about doing a webinar. And remember that if you have done a presentation before, if you present a lot, that if you are a trainer or a presenter, you're going to grow over time. You're always learning, you're always improving. I've been doing this for a long time, and I was actually telling Felicity before, I used to be a little rusty. I don't present as much as I used to. I had a job as a trainer for 4 years. I'm not in that position any longer. So these are kind of skills that you have to keep going over time, and they're always going to change and they're always going to grow. So if you are asked to do a webinar, decide to do a webinar, you might think, what are you going to cover? Why are you doing this? What makes a good webinar presentation? And one of the first things you should ask yourself is, what should it cover? And I have a slide at the end that's going to have a lot of the different people that I'm going to mention along the way. I'm going to refer to a couple of books, a couple of website postings, some presentations, a podcast, and that's all there, so you don't have to write this down. But Adobe Connect had this great little article, and it said 6 things you should never do in a webinar, and that was by Shelby Britton. And I thought Shelby was really said a really interesting thing at the beginning of her post. She said that your focus should always be 2 things. Number 1, your audience, and number 2, your content. So you want to have an objective for your attendees. What does your audience want? It could be action-oriented, it could be measurable, and it really should be learner-focused. You're doing this for the person who's listening, not just to say what you know about a topic. And I think that that's always a really tough thing to do. So when you're focusing on their student, as I've taken training on being a trainer over the years, I remember one of the courses I took said, what's their pain? You know, why are they there? What do you want to solve for them in your presentation that day? Another book that I've used, it's starting to get a little old, it's 2006, but Robin Nydorf has a book called Teach Beyond Your Reach. So if you're doing webinars, if you're doing asynchronous classes, if you're doing web courses and you're teaching some of those, I recommend taking a look at it. It's an interesting book. I don't know if she's updated it. There might be some more updated stuff out there. But she said that your learning objectives that you're going to decide on are your raw material. It's not going to be your final content. You're going to plan with them, and with that you're going to kind of be able to focus in and translate it into something learner-friendly. You might be a subject expert, but the person that you're talking to in 1 hour does not have to walk out of there being a subject expert. Somebody asked what the name of the book was again. It's Teach Beyond Your Reach by Robin Nydorf, and that's going to be on a slide at the end of the presentation, so you'll have that when you get the slides. You know, when I did some of these online questioning, when I talked to some folks on Twitter and stuff, one of the persons said that in the webinar format, and I thought this was a really good statement, complex and technical info is unlikely to be remembered. But you really want to hit the highlights, and if you want to get detailed, you can send that in notes later. And I've seen a bit of this, you know, being part of ALCTS and being part of tech services. I've seen a lot of RDA presentations. I've done MARC presentations and cataloging presentations over the years. And we do kind of have text-heavy slides. We end up with a lot of MARC records, XML records, whatever you want to see, now RDF triplets on our screens. And it's kind of like it makes it like a handout for the end. So sometimes that's going to be on your slides, but you can always make a separate handout for it as well. So when you're coming into your scope of content, focus on something meaningful. Focus on something timely. What is that learner trying to solve? And think about your in-depth knowledge. Is that in-depth knowledge that you have, is it enough to just get them started? Or are you going to give them something that puts them on a path to succeed at a topic? Or are you going to end up alienating them? Are you going to end up boring them? Are you going to sit there and say everything you know about a topic so that in the end they didn't really hear what you said? And when you're trying to get your focus point and figuring out where you want to be, remember that you're always going to be a little bit too basic for some people, and you're always going to be a little bit too advanced for others. This is something, as trainers, as presenters, we always come across. Someone said to think about it kind of like scoring at the Olympics. I think it's gymnastics. You throw out the top score, you throw out the bottom score, and you kind of look at what you have in between. So some people have told me they throw out their top evaluation, the best thing, oh, this was the best webinar ever, I loved it, and the worst evaluation, this person doesn't know what they're talking about, I can't believe I spent any money on this. So you kind of have to find that in between. And sometimes that means you have to leave things out. You only have an hour. Actually, you have less than an hour. We're going to talk about timing. You're not going to be able to get every single thing in there that you can. And especially with adult learners, respect their time. Know that when you are doing this, you have to think about putting things into increments. People can only concentrate for a certain amount of time, and you might want to have 15-minute increments, maybe 10-minute increments on there. When you're doing this and you're competing for the demands of time, you want to do it so that it's relevant, that it's interesting, and that it's going to try to solve something when they go back. One of the toughest things I think that we've experienced is that your descriptions also have to be kind of accurate. And we've missed the mark on that before. You want to try to get in there somewhere so that you can make your description as good as possible so that people have a good idea of what they're coming in for, and that hopefully you might get out, kind of cut out those people where it is too basic or where it is too advanced. So I do have a few questions coming in. One person asked if I plan to address the technical aspects of webinars, and I am. There's going to be some of that coming along here. And somebody else asked about teaching computer classes, and would computer classes be good as a webinar? And, you know, I think that depends. I think that as long as you can do it in a small section, again, if you're doing a 1-hour computer class, sure, you can make that into a webinar. And we're going to talk about some of the technical stuff, though, because if you start demonstrating things and demonstrating software, sometimes you can get into a little trouble on that, too. So we'll cover that in just a bit. When you're trying to do your timing for a presentation, your sessions are going to be 60 minutes or 90 minutes. Anything longer than that, and you're just going to get in trouble. Sometimes as a trainer, you might take a class, and that might be 2 90-minute segments, 2 minutes. Okay. Sorry, yes, I know I lost audio. It says I've been restored. Can you hear me now? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, lots of yeses. Sorry. I don't know what happened there. Okay. I'm back. Shows you what can happen in a technical webinar. So you want 60 to 90 minutes. 60 minutes is really as long as anyone can pay attention. Break stuff into segments. Think about 10 to 15-minute segments. Think about how you can chop stuff up and have some interaction in between. Add those polls at the end of the sections. Stop for a moment. Stop and ask if there are questions. Even if you want to wait until you get questions until the end, I really want to say that try to avoid that. I mean, try to find a way that you're going to, how can I say this? I would say build in those pauses. Build in those pauses in there. And by doing that, you're going to give people time to react to you, and it's going to give a nice flow. Sometimes when you have a moderator, that might help you out too, to get some of that in there. You can keep an agenda to say on time, on track, but try not to speak to that the whole time. You know, you're focusing on the learner. You know, at this one time, you're thinking that, oh my God, how am I going to get everything across in such a small amount of time? And on the other hand, your listeners are thinking, wow, this is way too much information. I can't take all of this in. I can't concentrate. So you have to kind of find that way. So the moderator can help you with times for questions, time for interactions. I've had some people saying that they lose concentration in their comments. 90 minutes. I think 90 minutes is really pushing it, and I would only recommend that if you actually are doing a class and some sort of workshop. It's always better to have to stretch. It's always better to have to make it a little bit longer than to end up rushing through it. Because if you're rushing through it, then everyone's going to notice. I was in a webinar once where I think it took until about 40 minutes in that the person actually started talking about what we all thought that person was going to talk about. And it was really interesting, but then he only had like 10 minutes. And I don't think any of the listeners really appreciated that. So it's always good to limit your introduction and really get to the meat of your topic. Again, what's the pain? What are you trying to solve for your users? Slides. So as you're building your webinar, and this kind of goes for webinars and for other presentations, and I hope a lot of you know this, please speak to your slides. Don't read them, as I just read the first bullet point on there, so you can sort of do it, but I'm not going to read this entire slide to you. In some of my research when I was coming into this, somebody quoted, I think it was Sarah Houghton, the librarian in black, said that every time a presenter reads the slides, a panda dies. Aww. So we don't want to kill the pandas, and we also don't want to kill our listeners. So if your slide can replace you, you're not doing your job. That was a great quote from somebody who was in one of these webinars on presenting that I have a little link to at the end here. So plan 2 to 3 minutes per slide. I think this is where people get into a lot of trouble. If you're doing an hour-long webinar, which means you actually only have about 45 to 50 minutes to talk, if you have more than 20 some odd slides, you're going to be in trouble. If you have 60 slides, you're not going to get that done. And some slides might be a little shorter and some might be a little longer, but if you kind of keep that in your head, 2 to 3 minutes a slide, you're going to be doing all right. Think about images, think about transitions. Don't put flashing GIFs in. That would be, well, actually I guess GIFs have kind of come back into vogue in a different way than they did before. It's more like short videos than they were flashing dogs running to mailboxes and things like that. Think about also with a webinar, you're going to have a little bit more text than you might at a conference presentation. If you do all pictures, what's that user going to walk away with? If you do choose to do all pictures, I would strongly suggest giving people a handout that they can go back to and reference the topics that you talked about. You know, if you're going to go TED-like and do 1 word per slide, again, you really might want to do a handout. It's a little bit different than an in-person presentation, because when you're presenting in person, you're the focus. When you're talking, they can see you moving around, you have eye contact and all of that. when you're not in person, then your slides kind of have to do a lot of the talking. One of the technical things, find out if you can share audio or videos on your slides. We've come across this before in ALCTS webinars and other places. Depending on the software, you might not be able to share that. And if your whole presentation is built around a video that you really love or an audio clip that you really love and you can't share it, well, you're going to have to find a different way to build that presentation if it's not something you're going to be able to share. So definitely find that out ahead of time before you spend hours putting a presentation together built around something that you won't be able to even show. So I do have 2 links here. You'll get this later. And these are 2 different things of best practices for slides and presentations, and they've kind of been updated over time, and I really do recommend them. Somebody has a question that I think I cover a little later on. I have a Know Your Software slide, and it's, do online demos usually work in presentations? And I think that it depends. There are some problems with online demos. Sometimes the software changes before you do your presentation. How many of you have experienced that? I remember I worked in public library for a while, and I would do training there, and I would be, okay, let's look at this EBSCO database today, and it would look way different than it did the day before. Or somebody said that they were presenting on Facebook, and Facebook changed. My Twitter changed on Monday night. You know, there's always those sorts of things. So, you know, you really want to be careful with your online demos. If all you're doing is showing software, if all you're doing today is saying, okay, we're going to learn how to use this database in EBSCO, sure, you could do it. But I wouldn't bounce around a lot either. Okay, and talking about handouts, there's the question about providing handouts at conference presentations as well as doing webinars. And I think that kind of depends. Sometimes there's budget for it, sometimes there isn't. You might be better off giving people a link and posting a handout somewhere else that they can look at later. I think that that might help. I know that ALA has some restrictions on what kind of handouts you can have. I was talking about this with the program committee for ALCTS earlier today. It seems you can only do a 1-pager. So there's lots of different ways now to share information without handing people a piece of paper, and you can always post something online for people to refer to later. Okay. So when you're thinking about webinar topics also, and I'm going to get into a little bit more of the knowing your software and getting into the actual day of presenting and what you should do when you present. This is still a little bit of the planning stage. Here are some sample webinar topics that have actually been presented from ALCTS. And you'll see some of it is workflows, some of it has been based on standards, some of it has been based on specific tools, and there's even some theory in there. So again, try to hone in on something. I do enjoy the ones, and you know, sometimes I wish I can build something like this, and I just haven't been able to yet. You know, 10 easy steps, 6 tips, 5 ways. You know, if you can really break down your topic into those small pieces, you're going to be successful, and you're going to keep people's attention, and you're going to be able to really hone in on what you want them to know. So I'm going to pause again, see if you guys have some questions, and I'm going to put up my next poll to see if you have been paying attention. So when you are presenting a PowerPoint, which of these things should you do? Should you read every slide for emphasis? Should you speak to the slide? Should you use as many flashing GIFs as you possibly can? So I'm using some of these polls to break things up, also to pause for questions. Remember, when you are doing polls, that sometimes people are in a big group. It might take them a little bit to get over to the keyboard to be able to do things. So you want to give them a little bit of time. It's okay to pause. It's okay to make it go quiet for a little bit. I tend to read the questions over the poll to try to keep things going. And you're never going to get 100% of people voting. Usually try to get into the 80s or 90%. I know people are doing other things. One of the great things about webinars is the idea that you can go back and forth and do different things. You can be on Twitter, you can be answering some emails, you can be looking at American libraries, you know, that sort of thing at the same time. So somebody just asked, how long should you typically allow for polls? And what I try to do is look at the percentage that have voted. So here I got an 80% response rate. We have a lot of people on today. We have over 200 people who are listening in. So I think 80% is a pretty good response. Sometimes I try to get into the 90s. And you know, you can just kind of feel it, and you'll kind of see when the pulse slows down. So I can see interactively how quickly things are coming back to me, and I can kind of judge from there when I might just stop that poll. So some people, let's see, I do have a good question here. How much time should you allocate for people joining you on the webinar, the intro, the actual content and delivery, and the Q&A? So I think that's a really good question. So let me break that down. That's a really good way to break that down. So allocate for people joining you, no time at all. You're going to start at 1 o'clock, start at 1 o'clock. You know, people are adults. They can join in. They miss a little bit, they'll get the recording. I would not wait on people unless it's more of a workshop situation and you need more interaction from them. Intro, as short as possible, a minute, maybe 2. Actual content, about 45 minutes, I'd say. And then Q&A will fill up the other 10 to 15. And also, you might have a wrap-up at the end. Like, we have a little introduction for ALCTS, and at the end, we kind of tell you what's going on. So you're going to probably add 5 minutes for that beginning and end of maybe your presenting group if you're working with another organization. So about 5 minutes for beginning and end, 45 minutes for your content, 10 minutes for questions is a pretty good rule of thumb. Somebody asked if the poll function is part of the software. It is part of the software. Today I am using GoToWebinar. That is our software, and I'm going to talk about some of the different kinds of software in just a little bit here. So that poll is built in to GoToWebinar. You can always also do what I like to call a straw poll and just say, hey, raise their hand if you do this or do that. In a group this large, that gets kind of tough with 200 some odd people. So you know, that kind of goes along there. So let's talk a little bit about the actual presenting and the software that you're going to use. So here's a happy dragon I found on Flickr. I love this guy. You want to emphasize your topic. You want to sound like you're having fun. So think of this little dragon whenever you're presenting. You totally want people to think of, have a good feeling when you come off of the webinar. And I think I have it in a further slide or somewhere along the way that most of what people get out of a presentation is how they felt. They don't always remember what they learned, but they remember more how they felt. Oh, it was kind of interesting. Oh, I had kind of fun. Yeah, I think I wrote down 1 or 2 things. Yeah, that was good. So think of this little happy dragon. I love this picture. And I do have some of the softwares on the next slide here, so we are going to get to that. So presenting, practice, 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 practice. Practice by yourself. If you feel more comfortable, practice with others. I like to practice by myself for the most part. It really helps you get more comfortable with the software, not the software, with your presentation. Maybe also practice with the software. We do that with ALCTS, and hopefully if you're working with an organization, they will allow you for some practice session before you actually go live. Practice for pronunciation, practice for how words sound together. Sometimes there are words that you start stringing them together and you just can't say them right. I had an example where I agreed to do a, a script for ALCTS for one of their online courses. And I did the voiceover for the slides. And one of the slides kept using the word procurement card. And I can't even really say that now, Procurement. It's not really a word I can say. I don't like saying it. So if I were presenting it, I would remove that word and find some other way to say it. When you're actually presenting that day, find someplace comfortable, find someplace private. If you are in the middle of a cube farm, it's probably not the best place to actually do your presentation. You might want to borrow an office, or you might want to go somewhere, maybe a conference room, or maybe you want to stay home. I don't know. So I'm actually in my home office right now. I haven't done a home presentation in quite a while. I've got my dog in her dog bed next to me. I mean, it's a much different experience than sitting in my office, although I've been lucky to have my own office when I've been doing webinar presentations. Some people like to present to a picture. They like to put a picture of a loved one in front of them and it looks like they're talking to them. I know other people who have actually had someone sit in while they were presenting a webinar, so they felt like they were actually talking to the person sitting next to them instead of just a screen. So that was kind of interesting. Move around if you're presenting. Are you the kind of person that talks with your hands? I know I am. We had a little experience before. You guys lost my audio. I have had the experience before where I have kicked out my microphone while I've been presenting because I was walking around my office and my computer was on the floor and whoops, there went the sound. So the example we had before was a network issue, but I have certainly done that myself by being an active mover when I present. Modulate your voice. Don't just sit there and kind of talk in a monotone and start doing this and just start reading because it's really not interesting. If you smile, if you emote, all of that's going to come through. I don't know if you guys have ever had that sticker on your phone. If you've ever been in retail, perhaps you're a receptionist, I know I have been, you would have a sticker on your phone that says, smile, the boss might be calling. So that when you picked up the phone, you would always be talking with a smile. And I really suggest doing that when you're doing a webinar. Smile and it's going to come through. People will hear the smile in your voice. And I would also say use your mute button. You have to cough, you have to sneeze, you have to take a drink of water. Tell people you're going to pause for a moment, put your mic on mute, take that sip of water. They don't have to hear that. They don't have to hear you sneezing. So I do have a couple of questions about taking questions and answering questions. So let me take a quick look here. I think this is a good place to put it. One person said that, is it always, let me take a look here, how often should you check and respond to questions from the attendees? I think this depends on your comfort level with presenting and your comfort level with the software. I am looking right now, basically I can't even really see my slides. What I mostly see is the questions screen, and I'm seeing your questions scroll on there. And I have a separate handout next to me that has my slide and my notes. So each page of my handout is the slide with the notes under it. And I don't even really look at the slide on the screen. I'm watching some of your questions scroll through. Now, because of the way this software works, I'm sharing my screen. So everything that I have on my computer right now, you can see. So I don't have Twitter up. So some people have asked about taking the audience from the mic, taking the audience from Twitter, taking questions from Twitter, and I'm not really going to be able to do that right now. Now, what we could do is have a moderator or somebody else feeding some of those back to me. That would also work, so then I can kind of see some of the questions that are coming along, and I know that some other organizations have done that. Taking questions via mic, I would not suggest that, and we're not going to be able to do that here because honestly, to see if someone's microphone is working, to hear them talk, to kind of take that break in between with 200 plus people, I think it's really difficult. So if I were doing this for 20 people, maybe I think we could have a little bit more interaction with the microphones, but when you're in a group this large, actually talking and using the mic is going to be tough because everybody's going to have different setups. And it takes a long time to be like, can you hear me? Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Oh, wait, can you hear me now? And that really kind of breaks things up for the other attendees. So sometimes you can have a moderator, and the moderator can ask you questions back and forth, ask you to pause, but find those places to pause so you can take those questions as they come along. And I'm going to pause for a second and take a drink here. Hold on. Okay. So I think a lot of people will tend to say, I just want to wait until the end and take questions all at once. And I think it works, but people kind of get distracted. People aren't as interactive then. They're not really listening to do those sorts of things. Now, someone just pointed out, I think this is great, that I just spent 6 minutes on this slide. So here's a great example, because I'm taking questions at the same time. So I'm talking to the slide, I'm talking to you, so is the slide 6 minutes long, or is the slide really 2 or 3 minutes long, and then I have 3 minutes of questions? So that's another way to think about it. Oops. Now I have to refocus my screen here. Okay, so software. People were asking about software. There's lots of different software, and I'm sorry, I actually didn't write them all down. These are some of their logos. So there's Adobe Connect. There's Google Hangouts, there's Microsoft Office Live Meeting. I forgot to put WebEx on here. Some people are using Skype. Today we are using GoToWebinar. Each of them has its own little quirks. So whoever is helping you organize your webinar hopefully will also get you practice and tell you all of the capabilities of that webinar that you'll be able to use because they're all different. I have used quite a few different ones over the years, and they all have their pluses and minuses and costs. One of the things you should think about is headset or phone. If you can get a headset, if you can borrow one, if you can get one from your IT department, if you can get one from home, highly, highly recommend it. And if you are doing it by phone, sometimes it gets a little money. Sometimes you're doing it on a speakerphone, and it might sound a little weird. Someone else just mentioned Adobe Connect. Yes, that is the one in the upper left corner there with the 3 people. Can't you tell that is Adobe Connect? Huh? Yes, their logo does not really speak Adobe to me, but that's what it is these days. So screen sharing, someone asked about that before. I think you have to be careful with screen sharing because software does change. I did mention that. You have to think about the software changes. You also have to think about going back and forth. So I'm trying to think which one it is that, maybe it's WebEx, where you go full screen and you're watching the slide, and then someone takes you out of the slide and they put you into some software, and then they take you out of the software, and then you go over to, let's see, come out of the software, and then you go back to the slides, and then your full screen goes back to regular screen, and it kind of just bounces back and forth a bit. And it's kind of hard when you're in a large room because then you have to keep going back to the desktop, and you have those different experiences, and it gets a little clunky. So again, test it out ahead of time. Somebody said that they like to use the hand-free desk microphones because of the breath sound. So I don't know if you're hearing a lot of my aspirations. You might be the puh and the s. Those sorts of noises do come up a little bit more in your headsets, so there is that experience. And somebody else said that they don't like when you have to have a plug-in or download. I think just about all of these software requires a plug-in or a download. I know GoToWebinar did, that we're doing today. You need a download even to watch it. And that is a problem in a lot of library computers because you are kind of shut down on your abilities to download things, and you might have to have someone do it ahead of time. So you just never know with that. I think that's a really good point. And here's another software issue. Somebody said, why are the questions being kept anonymous? That everybody would love to see each other's questions. Well, guess what? GoToWebinar doesn't give us that option. So GoToWebinar does not allow you to see each other's questions. And what that means is, as presenters or as moderators, we have to read them aloud back to you to let you know we got a question, and that's the answers. And that's why we try to promote some things in the background, like using Twitter, because you can talk to each other there, and you know, that is a little odd. Now, we could, I think, I don't want to add too much to the work for the ALCTS office, but we could also download the questions and share them with everybody. I don't think there's anything that weird in here. You can kind of see what different people said. I think if we're willing to do that, that might be kind of interesting. So we might try that as a little experiment. Usually we'll download the questions if we don't get to all of them, and then we try answering them. I mentioned polls. That happens. Hold on, I have to adjust my headset here. Usually there's some way to do that in the software. If not, you can always kind of do a straw poll. Hey, what do you guys think? Send me an answer. Chat options we just talked about. There is no way to chat back and forth in this software. And then that question and answer, like I said, I'm reading your questions as I go along. I'm reading them aloud. I'm sharing them with the audience as I see them. Sometimes you can see all the questions in the software that everybody asks, and sometimes you just can't. If you have more software questions, please shoot them to me. We'll talk about them some more. So try to keep them interested. You know, sell the sizzle. Why are people really there? I kind of talked about that. You know, share personal anecdotes. I've been doing that along the way as I've been talking. See what your real-world experience is, what you've done. You know, I've had great presentations. I've had terrible presentations. Nobody is going to be perfect. Make sure you give people time to respond. When you have a pause, you know, they're in a group, they're in a whole room. It might take a while for someone to type that question in. Use those polls or little activities in between to break up the session. You can say, ask a question, have everybody respond. And again, that works really well when you could see everybody's different questions. And then Twitter hashtags keep things going. We use a general one for ALCTS. It's always ALCTS CE. And we use that for all of our CE. But if we're doing like a larger presentation or a series, we might add a different hashtag to that. And you'll kind of see those conversations continue on Twitter and elsewhere when you can build those sort of hashtags in. And remember, it's okay to say what you don't know. Sometimes people will ask you questions and you might not know in the moment. You might just blank out. You might actually not know at all. It's okay to say you don't know something when you do get some of these questions. Find a way to follow up later. Like I said, you can take those, the chats. You can answer some of the questions offline, send them to all the presenters. We've done that too. Somebody asked, let's see, if there's a good overview of the different software options with a comparison of features. I believe those have been written up. I don't have a link to them. I could see if I can find one afterwards to share with the group, but I think there have been ones made where, you know, you get a little chart and I'm just writing a little note to myself here, where it does compare them side by side. Sometimes it really does come down to money and what's available to the organization that you're using. One other person said with polls, be careful how you do them. If somebody asks Twitter for poll questions, you might not be able to get them. I know there's another thing called polling everywhere or polling anywhere. I haven't used that, so I don't actually know what that software does. If somebody has used it before, you can pop that into the question box and let me know how it works. But I think, again, you're getting people to answer things outside of the software that you're actually using, and that's going to make it a little bit more complex. So I have another poll. Let's think about this. How long can people pay attention to a webinar? So when you're going through this, they can pay attention for 60 minutes, 5 minutes at a time, 30 minutes. I should probably also have 2 minutes on here because I think that's how some of us feel these days. Some of you are a little braver saying that you can get out there for a good 30 to 60 minutes, which I think is pretty good. I think 60 minutes probably on the outside, and 15 minutes for your little topics is a good rule of thumb. So 15 minutes, that's what I would say. Try to break it up into 10, 15-minute sections as you go along. Try to ask for questions and interactions in some of those time periods. So I want to share with you, as we're coming a little bit to the close here, different things that people told me when I asked, what do you think about webinars? Because people have webinar opinions. There's no doubt about it. So here's my dog Violet, and she wants to know what's going to make the audience happy. What's going to make you happy and cute and look like Violet here when you're doing webinars? So I have two quotes for you that I got from my little online investigations. Somebody says they really like webinars because of the fact that they can work on certain kind of other things simultaneously and still learn something. A lot of people are multitasking, and I think that we should take advantage of that. And it's kind of nice because I can't see you all multitasking as I would in a conference presentation. I think if you look around at a conference presentation these days, everybody is doing a couple of other things. They might be taking notes on their tablet, they might be on Twitter, they might just be emailing work. You never kind of know. So this way, I don't have to see you doing it, but I know you are. And somebody else said that they love that they don't have to travel and they could do it at home or work. And that overcomes everything that they don't like about webinars. So what did the audience want when I asked these questions? They want real-time surveys. So we've tried to do a little bit of that today. They want you to answer the questions in real time. And I think this is something that with practice you can really do. I think a lot of people want to wait until the end. I would recommend if you break things into 15-minute or so sections and give people time to ask questions at the end of those sections, you're going to be more successful and people are going to be more interactive. People want pros and cons. They want to be able to leave and say, okay, I kind of see where this is going. Yeah, maybe that'll work for us. Maybe it won't. Not really sure. That's something that was very attractive to people. They really liked the social media hashtags and the ongoing discussions. Copies of slides, and also someone else just mentioned here in the questions that they want the archived recordings. I think most of us do that, so that's really great. That kind of goes along with the chat transcripts that other people have mentioned. And I already said about the multitasking. I've gotten some other feedback here. Somebody says that they really like to listen to specific parts of the recorded webinar later after they've listened to it. Some people said why they like doing webinars. Someone said it makes them a little bit less nervous, that they actually do better when they're not in front of a group of people. And you know, I think sometimes that works too, that you might actually be a little bit more comfortable behind the scenes. Okay. And somebody said they can't see you. Now that's another thing. I don't have webcam capabilities. If I did, I'm not really sure how I'd feel about it. You know, I kind of move around a lot. I kind of spaz out a little bit in my office as I'm talking, so I'm not sure if I really want you guys to see that, but I promise you I am not in my pajamas, even though it is a snow day. So what do people not like about their webinars? What are some of the things that you should avoid? Now, also, remember that some of these I don't really think you can avoid when we start talking about them. Let's see. So quotes. One person said, I'm just not a fan. I just don't like webinars. But maybe it's because they've all been really boring. Well, yeah, I've been in a couple of boring ones. A lot of people have problems with the intros and the housekeeping, that you know, they just want one or two sentences. They don't want to listen about you. They just want to hear about your topic. And then details and history. And this, as I kind of mentioned before, any of you who are in the cataloging world and have sat in an RDA webinar, we have heard about the Ferber user tasks one too many times, and we all know what they are, and we know that RDA is here, so what are you actually going to tell me today that's going to help me catalog a book in my library? So here are some more of the audience pet peeves, and I've also been getting some in on the questions. I can share some of that. So you spend too long on housekeeping, said that, presenter bios. Too much time in the introduction or history, as I mentioned before. 40 minutes in, if you're just getting to the meat of your topic, you have lost your audience. Someone gave me a really interesting one. They said that they watched something where it was by a newer librarian, which was okay, but they did not actually say anything new. That they kind of came to a topic and said, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. Have any of you ever heard this before? And the answer was, yeah, we've all heard this before. So know what the history of your topic is. Know if there's lots of other stuff out there and you're just rehashing some old stuff. And then some people said they just don't like webinars because they can't concentrate. Some people, if you're going to stick them in a room in front of a computer and it's after lunch and it's hot and they have a headset on, they're going to start dozing off. And I don't think that you're going to really be able to help some of those people. People like it because they can do 6 other things. People hate it because they're going to fall asleep. I've had some other comments here as I've been talking. Some people said they've never had a successful webcam experience, and I think that sometimes it also slows things down, and images slows things down. So somebody said the image I showed before of my dog, you know, that kind of slowed its loading on your screen, and I think that's always going to be an issue with network and how things go with those sorts of things. Let's see. Somebody said that any of these can be said about any presentation, and that's true. And that's one of the things I've mentioned in the beginning, and I want to really let you know is you don't know, if you know how to do a conference presentation, you know how to do a webinar. They're really, really not, let's see. They're really not going to get you to the right place. It's not going to, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought here as I'm watching some of your questions. If you could do a presentation in person, you can do a webinar. These are good for presentations that you're doing in person. These are good for webinars. The only thing that's going to change is the technology, and that technology, if you practice enough, you're going to get there. So this is my resource slide. I don't expect you to write all this down. You're going to get a lot of this later on. Teach Beyond Your Reach was the book I mentioned before, 6 Things You Should Never Do in a Webinar. T is for training. This was something that came to me kind of late in the day where I hadn't really seen this before. There's this great group out there that is doing these podcasts, and podcast 129 talks a bit about webinars. I would recommend that one. There's also, and Maurice Coleman is the person who puts a lot of that together, and Maurice Coleman and Jill Hurst-Wall did a presentation for Syracuse on presenting your first presentation, and I recommend watching that one as well. And it also gives you an example of people using webcams for a webinar, because they are using webcams. I believe they were using Adobe Connect, so that will also work. You'll kind of experience the different software if you haven't ever seen that before. They talk a little bit about webinars, but a lot of it is also just presentation and stuff like that. ALCTS has been doing webinars for 5 years. You can see our history on there. I even have a pretty old one on there about weeding at your library. So if you want to see me do a presentation that's not just about presenting, you can listen to that one. And I also recommend, if you haven't seen it yet, American Libraries Live. They've done much more of a panel presentation. So they're doing a lot of it's all webcam, they're all talking to each other, they're all interacting with each other. So it's not so much an A to Z presentation as it is more of a panel and a discussion. So definitely take a look at those. Yeah, someone else said that they love Maurice. Maurice gave a webinar apparently through SLA on teaching to adult learners, and he has a book coming out later this year. It's called Crash Course in Presentation Skills, and I didn't put it on the slide because it's not out yet, and I don't know, maybe it'll change its title. But Crash Course in Presentation Skills from ABC Clio. Look for that from Maurice Coleman later this year. So I have more questions that have come through, and we're starting to get low on time here. So let me see. I just want to remind you of a couple of things. Focus on your topic. Create an outline, but don't read it out loud. It just doesn't really seem very natural. Practice a lot. Be authentic. Somebody did ask if you're considering on doing a webinar, how would you get someone to host you? And one way to do that is through ALCTS. They do allow you, so if you're in technical services, you can contact Felicity Dicus. to do that. And let's see. Sorry, just know someone just knocked on my door, so got a little distracted there. So I'm going to leave you with this. When you are presenting in person, online, and I'm going to answer some more questions here, remember these 3 things. Smile, pause, and breathe. It'll make you feel more natural. People will notice the difference. Definitely take that time, slow it down, and get where you need to be. So I'm going to breathe for a moment. I'm going to show you one last slide, or I'm going to try to. There's my doggie in the snow yesterday. And I'm going to look at some more of your questions. Now, if people do have to leave, I understand you can go. That's fine. I just wanted to get to some of the last ones here. Let's see. Somebody wants to know about an epic fail of a webinar and what would I have done differently. My biggest epic fail was when I was actually a trainer and I did a topic, I did a workshop on something that I did not know very well. And I tried to teach it to myself. And then I gave the presentation the day before I was going on vacation to a Caribbean cruise. My mind was not on that presentation that day. It was probably the worst presentation I've ever done. What would I have done differently? I would have practiced more. I would have learned my topic better. I would have calmed down a little bit and been more prepared. So definitely take that time to practice and know your stuff before you're going to do any presentation, webinar or not. Otherwise, we've had technical problems, and people have mentioned some of that along the way here. Your sound goes in and out. Presenters have technical problems sometimes. We actually had a really bad one for ALCTS where we couldn't hear the audio of the people at all. And even in the recording, it sounded terrible. And we did not post that recording. It was really bad. And we actually, I think, maybe offered to give some people money back because the tech issues were so bad it just did not work. And that was kind of a disappointment. But it happens, and, you know, you kind of move on. Let's see. Follow-up assessment or evaluation. We do have an evaluation form that you will all get from ALCTS after this, and it's always good to have that feedback and be able to see what you could have done differently. Remember, whenever you get feedback, throw out the best and the worst, and that's kind of how you did that day. Let's see. Someone asked about a recorded webinar. So if you're recording ahead of time, how are you going to make it interactive? I think it'd be really hard to make it interactive. I think you would break it up along the way and maybe stop and give people an exercise to do on their own. So record it, talk about something for 10 or 15 minutes, have them do something, then come back to your presentation. That might be a way to do it, even though it's a little asynchronous. That might actually work for you. There are bandwidth problems all the time with videos and those sorts of things. Sometimes incorporating a video, if you're just talking a webcam, that can slow things down. Sometimes you can't put a video in there at all. We haven't really been able to do that with GoToMeeting. I think we figured out a workaround at one point, but it really wasn't very successful. So yeah, there's always going to be tech issues. Let's see. Oh boy, sometimes the tech issues are part of the users. How do you remind attendees of that? Well, we have a great support team here with ALCTS. We have people who just do tech support, and they will actually go back and send little notes. Is your sound on? Is your volume up? Did you turn off your speakers? It's hard, you know, and sometimes we have to say, well, everybody else can hear just fine, so it's something at your end, and we really can't help you with that. It's kind of tough. You feel bad when that happens, but we try our best to at least help them along the way. Somebody asked about this webinar software and the tech side of this and who owns this. The GoToWebinar that we're using today is owned by ALCTS. ALCTS is a division of ALA. ALCTS pays for GoToWebinar on its own as a division, and that's who owns it. My personal library does not own any webinar software whatsoever. Is not something that we do. So it's often when you're sharing this with somebody else is sponsoring you, that sponsoring organization would have the webinar options. Somebody asked how you would find out how to do a webinar, how to get someone to sponsor you. Often there's calls for proposals. In ALA, I would talk to some of the continuing education committees for the different divisions. They might be able to point you in the right direction for that. I would say that that's a good place to go. And I think I'm going to answer one more question here, and then we're basically out of time. Somebody said, what's my calming down technique? And honestly, my calming down technique is actually a ramping myself up technique. So I'll smile and start talking to myself and get myself in the mode of presenting, and that helps me get started. I've tried some of the calming down techniques over the years. I remember there was one where you're supposed to breathe in a certain way, and it made me want to pass out. So that one didn't work for me. I think you have to find what's going to calm yourself down. And as I said before, remember to smile. Remember to pause, remember to breathe. So with that, I thank you for your time and attention this afternoon, and I'm going to pass you back over to Felicity.
Thank you, Keri. All of us, I think, are potential future presenters, including myself, so I appreciate that you covered so many different aspects of presentations. And from all the comments, I can tell that users found it helpful too. So to our audience, you're soon going to receive an evaluation form along with links to the recording and slides. So please take time to fill out that evaluation form, because the committee really uses those to plan our future references and presentations. So this was our first presentation for 2014, but we have a lot of additional ones coming up. So just in February, we have how to host a presentation week event, RDA. This is going to be a good one because it's about how RDA is developed, and we have the ALA representative who will be presenting that. February 26th is the first of our MOOC series, and there's another one in March. In April, we have our first Spanish language webinar, and we have several more that you'll find on our website. We also have e-forums, so those are 2-day moderated email chats, so I encourage you to sign up for those. And fundamental web courses, so these are 4 to 6 weeks, and here's the link for that. Thank you to Kira Healy and Vicki Grzinski for providing our tech support. We couldn't do this without them. And for all of you for joining us today and for all those questions and comments. We look forward to your participation in other ALCTS activities.